I was standing 6 feet from the auctioneer when the girl was brought in, and I knew, the moment she stepped into that wretched room, that something was about to go very wrong for everyone who thought they understood the Duke of Blackmere. They called these gatherings a private settlement of debts. The men in attendance, a dozen creditors, a pair of dissolute barons, and one red-faced merchant who kept mopping his neck with a handkerchief, called it a formality. What they were doing was selling a young woman to the highest bidder to clear a balance her father had run up over 15 years of gambling and poor investment. The father himself sat in the corner, not meeting anyone's eyes. I had known Lord Voss in better days. There were none left. The girl's name was Emmeline Voss. She was 22, with fair skin reddened slightly at the cheekbones from cold or suppressed feeling. I could not tell which, and brown hair pinned in a plain, careful style that must have taken her some effort. She wore a dove-gray dress that had been pressed with great care, and was nonetheless clearly old. She looked at no one when she entered. She held a small reticule in both hands, and she walked to the indicated place at the front of the room and stood there, very straight, as though she had decided, perhaps some hours before, in front of whatever mirror she had, that she would not be diminished by this. Not in her posture, not in her eyes, not in the way she breathed. I will tell you what I told the Duke afterwards. That was the moment the room lost whatever claim it had to dignity. Not her, them. I had come with Edmund Cresswell, the Duke of Blackmere, because he had received a letter from Lord Voss weeks prior proposing exactly this arrangement, his daughter's hand against the full discharge of the debt, and Edmund had said nothing about it for a fortnight before asking me, the evening before this gathering, to ride with him. I was his oldest friend. I knew what that silence meant. It meant he was considering it seriously, which meant something in him had already decided. Edmund was 38 years old, and had spent 14 of those years being called the most feared nobleman in 3 counties. The name Blackmere, in certain drawing rooms, made mothers move their daughters to the far side of the supper table. He was not cruel. He was simply precise, economical with warmth, and entirely without patience for pretense, which in aristocratic England is taken for the same thing. He had never married. He had come close once to a woman who ultimately chose a title with more social glitter and less brooding silence. He had not, as far as I could observe, grieved very long. He stood at the back of that room now, in a dark tailcoat, and that particular stillness he had when he was paying complete attention to something. His arms were folded. He watched Emmeline Voss take her place, and I watched him watch her. The auctioneer, a solicitor, strictly speaking, which made it all somehow worse, began to enumerate the terms, the sum, the conditions. The word betrothal was used as a euphemism for what everyone in the room understood was a purchase. Emmeline did not flinch. One of the barons opened with a figure. The merchant countered. There was a pause, the sort that suggests both parties are doing arithmetic in their heads while carefully not looking at the woman they are bidding on. Emmeline Voss looked at the far wall. Her chin stayed level. Edmund uncrossed his arms. Double, he said, from the back of the room. The word landed like a stone dropped into still water. The baron turned, the merchant turned, the solicitor turned. Lord Voss made a strange sound, not quite speech. Double the outstanding sum, Edmund said again, moving forward now, and the men stepped aside as though by instinct. In full, settled this afternoon. I will need the documents drawn by 4 o'clock. He stopped beside the solicitor, and then, only then, he looked directly at Emmeline Voss. If the lady is agreeable, there it was. 4 words that none of them had thought to include in any of their arrangements. If the lady is agreeable. The solicitor blinked. Lord Voss made another sound. Edmund waited. Emmeline looked at him for a long, steady moment. I have tried many times to describe what passed across her face in that pause. Not relief exactly, and certainly not the grasping gratitude that men in that room might have expected. Something quieter, an appraisal. She was deciding whether he was what he appeared to be, and she was doing it without embarrassment, in front of everyone. "I am agreeable, Your Grace," she said. Her voice was even and clear. Edmund gave a single nod. "Then we are done here." They were married by special sites 11 days later in the chapel at Blackmere Hall, with myself and Edmund's elderly housekeeper as the only witnesses, because Emmeline had asked for something small and Edmund had agreed without discussion. I stayed at Blackmere for the first 3 weeks, under the pretext of correspondence I needed to finish. Really, I was watching because I was Edmund's friend and I wanted to understand what I had seen in that solicitor's room. What I saw was this. Emmeline Voss learned Blackmere Hall the way she had walked into that room, carefully, without complaint, with a quality of attention that was not meekness, but something closer to intelligence applied to difficult circumstance. She knew she had been bought and sold. She did not pretend otherwise. She had the particular dignity of a woman who has already survived the worst thing and declined to be destroyed by it. Edmund was formal with her. Correct. He held doors and stood when she entered and addressed her as my lady, with precisely the inflection he used for every title. She addressed him as Your Grace and managed his household with quiet competence and asked him nothing personal. It was excruciating to witness. Then one evening I came into the library and found them both there. Edmund at the writing desk, Emmeline at the far bookshelf, pulling volumes and examining their spines with the absorbed focus of someone who had been denied access to a good library for some time. She did not notice me. Edmund had noticed her, though. He was not writing. He was watching her move along the shelf, her finger trailing the bindings, her lips moving slightly as she read the titles to herself. I left before either of them saw me. The change when it came was not dramatic. That is not how Edmund worked. It began with a question about an obscure volume on natural philosophy that Emmeline had apparently been reading in the mornings. He had noticed it left on the breakfast table and remarked on it. She had answered, not briefly, the way a careful houseguest answers a polite inquiry, but in full, with an opinion and a counter-argument and a reference to another text she had read as a girl. Edmund had gone very still in the way he went still when something engaged him entirely. By the time I left Blackmere at the end of that third week, they were finishing dinner and staying at the table long after the candles burned low. I came back for Christmas. I was not invited. Edmund simply wrote and said he assumed I would come, which for him was warmth. The house was different. I could not have explained it to someone who had not known Blackmere before. Fires were lit in more rooms. There were dried flowers on the hall table. Not the stiff arrangements the housekeeper ordered, but something wilder, clearly gathered by someone who had been out in the grounds. There was a brown spaniel that flung itself at Edmund's leg when he came in from riding, and was received with a hand on its ears as though this had always been the case. Emmeline met me in the hall and said it was good to see me, and she looked as though she meant it. That evening after dinner, I watched Edmund refill her wineglass without being asked, and then sit back and listen to her speak. She was describing a letter she had received from a family she had quietly been assisting, a widow and her daughters in the village, and his face carried an expression I had not seen on it in a very long time. Not contentment exactly, because that word was too soft for Edmund's register. Something more like recognition, as though he had been looking at the wrong horizon for years and had finally turned around. Later, when she had gone upstairs, I asked him how he was. Better than I have been, he said, and poured himself a glass and stared into the fire for a moment. She told me last month that if I wished to dissolve the arrangement, she would not contest it, that she had means enough now to manage independently. He paused. I told her I had no such wish, that if she were willing I wished to continue, not as a settled debt, but as a choice she made freely, and so did I. And I asked. She said she was willing. He was quiet for a moment. Then she went back to reading. I laughed. He smiled, a proper smile which on Edmund's face was worth more than most men's declarations. She is the most self-possessed person I have ever met, he said, with something near wonder in it. I find I am entirely unable to imagine Blackmere without her. That was all. But I had been his friend for 20 years, and I knew what it meant when Edmund Cresswell said he could not imagine something absent. He meant it would undo him. The Duchess of Blackmere, in the years that followed, was known in 3 counties for her quietly steady management of the estates, for her frank and unpretentious manner, with every soul from the village to the drawing room, and for the fact that the most feared duke in the region would cross any room, any company, any occasion to stand beside her, not loudly, never with announcement, but with the steady and unmistakable certainty of a man who has found the one thing in the world he will not be careless with. I was there at the beginning, in that wretched room. I watched him pay double for a woman they considered a debt to be discharged. He knew, I think, even then, that she was worth considerably more than that. It only took them a little while to agree on it together, freely, without condition, and by each their own clear choosing, which, as it happens, is the only way any of it ever truly counts at all.